Hello students and welcome to the lecture. So students, as we know that we are covering the schedule and the tribal areas, right? This is the topic on which we have been discussing right now. And basically under this particular series of the schedule and tribal areas, under this particular series of the schedule and tribal areas, these are the topics that we have scheduled for the discussion. Like the introduction part, like the schedule areas in India, an overview, like the criteria for schedule areas identification, the constitutional provisions and the governance, the concerns that are related with the schedule areas, all right, the administration of the schedule areas, the scheduled tribes, what is the meaning of them, the general concerns of the tribal community, what are the challenges and how we will addressing them. Thereafter, the significance of the indigenous communities, okay, problems faced by the tribal groups, conclusion, and the administration of the tribal areas. Okay, so these are the topics that we have scheduled for the discussion. If we talk about the topics that we have covered so far, so we have done with the introduction part, we have done with the schedule areas in India, we have done with the criteria for the identification of schedule areas. Okay, so these three topics are the topics that we had finished right now. The topics that we are left with is the constitutional provisions and the governance, the concerns that are related to the schedule areas, the administration of the schedule areas, the scheduled tribes, okay, the general concerns of the tribal community, addressing the challenges, the significance of indigenous communities, the problems that are faced by the tribal groups, the conclusion part, and the administration of the tribal areas. All right. So this is the picture that we have created so far altogether. Basically, in this lecture, we will start with the constitutional provisions and the governance. But before this, let us remind that what we had discussed in the previous lecture. Okay. So in the previous lecture, we had seen the last criteria for the identification of the schedule areas, and that was the recommendations of the commission. Like I had told you, basically the government, okay, do not having that much of expertise, that much of efficiency, and that much of time that the government by itself will look after the areas that they could declare as an schedule in the tribal areas. And why it is so? Why it is so? Because it is quite obvious that the government is not only responsible for the upliftment of the backward areas and the scheduled areas, but the government is also responsible to look after the mainstream areas. All right. So that's why the government could not direct itself fully after the working on the scheduled and the tribal areas while not having any side on the normal mainstream. So that's why to overcome these challenges, the government basically appoints the commissions. Okay. The commissions are made up of expertise. They having the expertise, so that's why they also having the efficiency. And because they are appointed for dedicatedly look after some purpose, that's why they also having the sufficient time. Okay. And when we talk about the schedule in the tribal areas, so the main commission is the Bhuria Commission. Okay. So now the question that I'm going to ask you is that when was the Bhuria Commission appointed for the first time? Okay, the question I had already asked you in the previous lecture. Now in this lecture also I will ask you the same question. To answer this, you will have the 30 seconds and your time starts now. Just think about it. In just a previous lecture we had finished this. So I'm expecting the right answer. Okay, the 10 seconds have been passed. Last 20s are remaining. All right. Last 10 seconds you guys have. Okay, the time is going to be up. And the time's up. Correct answer is 1996. in the year of 1996, basically the Bhuria Commission was appointed for the first time. And the Bhuria Commission was appointed to recommend the criteria to identify any area as a schedule area. Like in the previous lecture also, we have taken the example of this. Like if there are 10 areas, area 1, area 2, area 3, area 4, area 5, area 6, area 7, area 8, area 9 and area 10. How many areas are there? 10 areas are there. Okay. So if the government is required to identify these areas, okay, to identify these areas, basically how many of them are the scheduled areas and the tribal areas, so that there must be some criteria on the basis of which the identification could be happen. Right? That is what we have discussed. So that's why the Bhuria Commission was required to look after the criteria that could be used by the government in order to identify the schedule and the tribal areas. And which type of criteria the Bhuria Commission emphasized on? So in order to identify the tribal population, the Bhuria Commission emphasized on the tribal population percentage. Okay, like we have taken the example. Suppose when you were looking after the identification of the schedule and the tribal areas out of these 10 areas. So you have found out, like basically if any area is having the population more than 50%. If any area is having the population of tribals as in percentage more than 50%, then the area should be the schedule and the tribal areas. Right? That is what the example we have taken. So similar type of things the Bhuria Commission also recommended. All right. Thereafter, we have discussed the expert guidance. Okay. Like the recommendations of such commissions provide the expert guidance to the government in identifying and declaring any new schedule area. Okay. That is just not only declaring as an area, but also on the objective criteria. Like what is the objective behind it? Okay. Thereafter, we have discussed the importance of the criteria, why the criteria is important. The first is the equitable development. Okay, like these criteria ensures that the area that having the significant trial populations and they are also the backwardness. Okay, so our two motives basically satisfied here. First, taking the economic backward areas into the mainstream. Second is take care of the significant tribal populations that is residing there. Okay, so not only we will be able to ensure the equitable development, but also we will be able to ensure the upliftment of the schedules and the tribals that were living there. All right, and we could provide the special attention and also the special resources to ensure their development. Okay. Second thing is the administrative efficiency. Okay, like focusing on the compactness and the viability. Focusing on the compactness and the viability, the criteria basically aimed to enhance the administrative efficiency in managing these areas. Okay, and the last is the empowerment of the tribals. Okay, like schedule areas and the criteria for their identification, they are basically integral part of the empowerment as well as the welfare of the tribal communities, and basically could ensure their participation also in the development process and ultimately indulge them in the mainstream that we are having in the country. Okay, so that was the last criteria in the series of criteria for identification of the schedule areas, and that is what we had discussed in detail. Here we have just revised it, or you can say we have just taken an overview. All right, but if you have watched the previous lecture in the well enough manner, you have revised it, then you will be able to grasp the facts and figures in the proper direction. All right, so after finishing the criteria, now the next thing that we are going to start is constitutional provisions and the governance. Okay, So basically, so far we have seen the introduction, we have seen the other things like what are the schedule areas in India, an overview. Thereafter, we have seen that what are the criterias we must follow in order to identify the schedule areas. Now, what we are going to talk about, we are talk about the next dimension, that is the constitutional provisions and the governance. Constitutional provisions and the governance, like what provisions and what governance measures we have with us in order to make them indulge in the mainstream. Okay, like you can say we have discussed about the identification process and the criteria. Okay, so after identifying the criteria and all, after identify the areas, what special you could do for them, that is the important thing. For example, if we take the previous example where we had the 10 areas, okay, out of those 10 areas we have found 7 areas are basically the normal generation area, that having the normal population. 3 areas were the areas where the population percentage is more than the 50%, right? Where the population percentage was more than 50%. That is what we have seen. Okay. Now, if you have identified these areas, that these areas must be declared as a schedule area, then what kind of special provisions you could make for them? Okay. And what are the provisions we already have in our constitution and the governance? That's become the important thing. Okay. And that is what we are going to see here. All right. So please pay your attention here. All right. So the first thing is the fifth schedule, Article 244(1). Okay. So basically, if we're talking about the fifth schedule, now we are going to talk about fifth schedule. So the question is, the fifth schedule basically deals with the schedule and the tribal affairs into how many states? Again, I'm repeating the question. The fifth schedule deals with the schedule and the tribals into how many states? To answer this, you will have the 30 seconds. Okay. And your time is going to be start now. Just think about it. All right, the 10 seconds have been passed off. Last 20s are remaining. Last 10 seconds. Okay, the time's up. So the correct answer is into 10 states. Okay. So fifth schedule deals with the 10 states of India, okay, which having the significant schedule in the tribal populations, while the sixth schedule deals with 4 states of Northeast. Okay. So here we are going to talk about the fifth schedule, Article 244, subclause 1. Okay. Remember, we are not talking about the entire Article 244. Okay. Basically, what generally happens when we talk about any article. So article is just not having the definition. What I'm saying, article is just not having the definition, but article is like a full paragraph. Okay. And this kind of paragraphs generally having the clauses. Okay. So each clause containing the different you can say information, like you have seen whenever you have watches the PYQs from the politics sessions and from the constitution sessions, you have seen that article 120/128, or you can say article 120/A, article 120/B, this kind of things. Okay. So what are these? These are the sub clauses. Okay. The article in reference full, like you can say article 244 entirely deals with the schedule and the tribal areas. Okay. But it also having the clauses that are deals with the different parts of the schedule and tribal areas. So these clauses are important. Okay. Because in examination, if you are not so much aware about these clauses, I guarantee you that you will mark a wrong answer. Definitely you will mark a wrong answer. Okay. So the first is the fifth schedule of the Indian Constitution basically applies to the administration and control of the schedule areas. Now here you can say there are two different words, administration and the control. So what is the significance of these two words here? Okay, first if we talk about the control, then the term control here is used in reference of the intervention. Okay, like if we talk about the government having the normal government machinery, all right, through this machinery the government is working on various aspects. All right, so when we talk about the schedule areas, all right, when we talk about the schedule areas, then as I have told you many times, basically the government try to less intervene in the schedule and the tribal areas. Why? Because of the two main reasons, like as I have told you. First, the government is not so much efficient, not so much expert, not so much having time to look after the schedule and the tribal areas only. Why? Because the government is having the balance approach. It is not only responsible for the upliftment of schedule in the tribal areas, but also responsible to look after the normal mainstreams, right? So that's why the government try to less intervene. And second significance of this, or you can say the second implication of this could be that basically when the government try to less intervene, basically the schedule and the tribals getting the right to make the development policies for their own in accordance with the modern requirement while preserving their traditional cultures. All right, so that is the thing. But what could happen here because of this? What could happen here? Basically, when the government tries to less intervene, so that you can say let the forces free on the ground. Okay, like if we talk about any schedule area, any tribal area, so the first thing that we could say here is that it is quite impossible that that particular area is inhabited by only one tribe. Is it possible? No. All right, it may have the other tribes as well. For example, suppose there is any area 1. Okay, there is any area 1 that has been declared as in schedule and tribal areas. So it is not possible that only the X tribe having their inhabitants there. There would be other tribes as well, like X tribe, Y tribe, Z tribe, B tribe, C tribe, D tribe. Many tribes could be there. All right. So when the state is not intervening, okay, the resources over there are also limited. Okay, so what could happen here? Like the normal situation of law and order could be impacted. Okay, the tribes will try to get the control over the areas. All right, and if you want me to take the live example of it, then you could take the Manipur violence. Like recently, we know the state of Manipur is burning right now even. All right, so what was the issue was here? There were two tribes, Kuki and Methi, right? Kuki and Methi tribes were there. These two were the significant tribe of the region. And these tribes are basically fighting with each other to get control over the resources that are available there. All right. And why this could not be prevented? What I'm saying, not could be prevented. I'm not saying they could not be controlling, because controlling and preventing are different aspects. Okay. Controlling is when something is happening. Preventing is to stop something from happening. All right. So you can say, suppose if you are the person, all right, and the weather is changing. We all know whenever the weather is changing, so our body generally gets diseases like the cold and fever, this kind of things. All right. So if you having the cold and fever, then you will take the medicine to control it. Okay, to recover from it. But if you do not having the cold and fever, then what you will do? You will take the precautions to prevent the cold and fever, right? That is the thing. All right. So controlling it means why it could not be controlled? Because the government was not intervening. Why it could not be preventing? Because the government set the forces free, okay, for their deployment. So that kind of situation could be there. All right. So fifth schedule allows the government to make any area as a schedule and tribal area and let the forces free, but also makes the government responsible to make the control over there. All right. And second is the administration. Now, what is the implication of administration here? Like administration is the different aspect. How it could be? Like administration means how the resources would be allocated, how the jobs would be created, employment would be created. Okay. How the society would be benefited through the measures as lines of the other areas. But because these are the scheduled and tribal areas, so their tradition must be protected. All right. These kind of things are there. And here you can say the scheduled areas are basically identified the President of India. Okay. So now there is a question that we have seen here. If the question comes in the examination, like which of the following is responsible to identify the area as a scheduled area? And the options are the Prime Minister of India, the President of India, the Union Government, the State Government. So what should be the answer? The answer should be the President of India. Now most of you will say, sir, when we were discussing in the previous slides, so we had seen basically the Union Government is liable to make the notification, right? That was the thing. So basically there is a one concept that we are required to make sure. Basically the state government could look after any area that they find suitable to be declared as a scheduled and tribal area on the basis of the criteria that are available. Then they are required to reach the union government to make the gazetted notification. Okay. But the final interpretation and the final identification would be done by the President of India. Why? Because the President of India is the constitutional head of the state. All right. No judgment could be passed by bypassing the President of India. That is the clear-cut thing. Got it? Got my point? Okay. So scheduled areas basically identified by the President of India, and these areas must be inhabited by the scheduled tribes. Okay. And requiring the special protection and the governance for their indulgement and upliftment into the mainstream. But on the other hand, we are also protecting their identity. Okay. After the president, the governors of each state. Like we know, the governor is the constitutional head of their respective state. Okay. Each state that having the scheduled areas. Okay. Remember, not the governor of each and every state that we have in India. This is not written down anywhere here. Okay. What is written down? That the governor of that state that having any scheduled areas. Okay. Is required to submit the annually report to the president regarding the administration of these areas. Okay, like whatsoever the measures the state government had taken as per the notification and for the upliftment of the schedule and the tribal areas with that particular state. Okay, an annual report of this kind of measures, the administration and all must be submitted to the president. Why? Because president was the one who identified the area as a scheduled area, and he is also the constitutional head of the state. When I say state, basically I'm meaning the nation. Okay. And when I talk about the state in the reference of governor, so basically I'm talking about the provinces or the administrative units that we have. And how many states we have? 29 states we have with the 9 union territories. Okay. So that was the, you can say the thing that we have seen in the article 244.1. Okay. So students, basically in this lecture, we have finished till here. In the next lecture, we would continue from here. Till then, just revise the facts and figures that all we have discussed in this lecture. Keep yourself ready for the next lecture. Okay. And the articles that we are seeing here. Okay. The articles that we are, you can say covering here. These articles are important from the examination point of view. Why? Because not only the direct questions from the from these articles will be asked in the examination, but also the interpretation part of it may be asked, like this one. Okay. So as I have told you, if you do not having the clarity in the article and the subclause, then what you will do, you will start judging every article as the same article. And that will be a huge mistake. Okay. And that will lead you towards the deduction in your marks. That is not so much desirable by any student who is preparing seriously. I'm not counting the casual ones. Okay. So students, with this note, we have finished here. And what we will do in the next lecture, we will continue from here. All right. Till then, just revise the facts and figures, and thank you.